everyone, and welcome to another SciFest Africa event and another one of our Discover workshops. Today, we're excited to bring you another installment of our Discover workshops where the wonderful Dr. T will walk us through a fun and engaging life science demonstration that you can participate in using basic objects found at home. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook Live viewers. As always, these workshops are recorded and previous ones can be found on our website at www.scifest.org.za, as well as our Facebook page. We encourage you to tell your friends, tell your teachers, tell your classmates and students. In case you haven't joined us before for these workshops, TANJA REINHARDT is the Science Centre Coordinator at the Science and Technology Education Centre at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. She was instrumental in establishing the STEC in 2008 and has grown it from a science museum to a vibrant educational centre for various levels. Apart from developing and delivering workshops, she has a passion for science shows. Her love for rocks, gadgets, and experiments makes her a frequent guest at events such as the Royal Show, Zulfest, and SciFest Africa. Her Germanic sense of humour and her passion for geology has won her awards as Best Workshop Presenter at SciFest Africa in 2013, 17, and 19. She holds a diploma and a PhD in mineralogy from the Ruhr University Bochum in Germany. Participation and questions are encouraged. Please unmute yourself if you have a question, or you can type it in the chat and I'll bring it up with Tanya. Otherwise, please be sure to keep your microphones muted. On that note, Tanya, I'll pass on over to you.
Thank you very much, Steph, and welcome for this last kind of workshops in this series. I hope you enjoyed the previous ones. If you enjoyed them and you haven't seen them, they are available on the Facebook website in SciFest. Okay, so today we're going to deal with the electromagnetic spectrum, and I brought on some experiments that I want to share. The majority, unfortunately, you can't really do at home, but I still hope that you are going to enjoy them and learn a little bit more about the electromagnetic spectrum. Okay, so let's just dive straight into it.
Mr. Worldwide, C-Bar. So listen up. Here we go. Electromagnetic spectrum. Here we go. Electromagnetic spectrum. Here we go. Electromagnetic spectrum. Here we go. Electromagnetic spectrum.
Radio waves, what's on TV tonight? And microwaves, they will cook your popcorn. From body light that's infrared comes from you and me. You can see visible light colors galore. Not shady ultraviolet rays can give you a suntan, and then X-rays. Look at phones if you want, and there be shortest of them all are the gamma rays. All together it's the EM spectrum.
For the ancients, science was grounded in observation. Even today, many of the questions science attempts to answer begin with an unusual sight. But we would not be able to make observations or see the world at all without light. But what is light? We can't touch or taste or hear it, and usually we can't even see light completely on its own. We see light as it is filtered through the atmosphere and reflected off different surfaces. To understand light, we need to understand a larger group of energy, known as electromagnetic waves. Light is a very small part of the electromagnetic spectrum, and all the types of waves in this spectrum share certain properties. All forms of electromagnetic energy, including light, are waves. And as waves, they all have frequency. Frequency is usually defined as the number of waves that pass a certain point in a second. The difference in frequency is a result of the size of the wave. A longer wavelength corresponds to a lower frequency. Electromagnetic waves are organized into types based on frequency. At one end of the spectrum are radio waves, which have the lowest frequency. The spectrum moves through microwaves, infrared rays, visible light, ultraviolet rays, and X-rays, to gamma rays, which have the highest frequency.
Okay, so this was just just some introductory video and some music that I picked up. And what we're going to explore today is basically what these different rays are of the electromagnetic spectrum, how we actually know that they're there, if there are any indications, if we can't really see them except for the visible light, and you know, what can we use them for? Okay, so this is just another version of the electromagnetic spectrum, and we've already heard that we have radio waves, microwaves, infrared waves, visible light, ultraviolet, X-ray, and gamma rays, and how they basically differ is in the type of wavelength. So they range from wavelengths that have the size of buildings down to the wavelengths that are almost as small as the atomic nuclei. Okay, so let's just dive straight into with our radio waves. So these ones are the longest wavelengths, and so they are basically 10 to the power of 3 meters, so which is about the size of a building. And you can already see we know them from radio astronomy, and we know them from our radios. And I just want to share with you my very first experiment. Just share. I'll just switch my camera. Okay, so I have to go up here, and I'm going to come into this picture here, and I'm going to switch on my radio here. So as you can see, and I hope you can pick up the music, the noise that things make. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a container over the radio. Okay, and as you can see, the music is still blaring, maybe slightly muted. Now I've got a bigger container. As you can see, the walls are quite thick, and it's made out of perspex. So let's see what's going to happen here. You still hear the music, and it's kind of a bit muted and so on. Okay, and I'll take it off, and it's still playing. And now what I've got here is basically just a metal container here. And let's see what's going to happen if, when I place this one over. And you can hear nothing. I pick it up. Music plays. I place it down. Nothing happens. I pick it up. And my radio just gave up. Okay, let me just, sorry, I just need to switch it off. So as you can see, whereas these ones here, the plastic containers, don't have any effect on our radio waves, metal actually does have an influence. So, and I could use basically a sieve, just like you use, or a strainer, just like you use in the kitchen, made out of metal. And I would place, if I'm going to place it over this one here, it still mutes my little radio. Just back. Okay, so the reason basically for this is that the metal cage or the strainer basically works like what they call a Faraday cage. So what happens is that the charges are distributed around the cage, and it cancels out any kind of electric charges or radiation. So in this case, our radiation are our radio waves. Okay, so it is in this interior. So what we basically proved is that there are waves, basically, that this antenna, this is what the antenna is for, that the antenna picks up for the radio. So if you cover the antenna in like a metal cage, nothing comes through, and you won't be able to listen to some radio. And I don't know if you've ever experienced it, that in specific parts of a building, for example, in a room and so on, sometimes it's also very difficult to get cell phone receptions or, you know, radio reception and so on. And this is because often your buildings contain metal meshes or wire meshes. just for structural purposes. And that also shields off, for example, radio signals. Okay, so I did a video just in case this one wasn't working, so I'm not going to show this because it's just what you've seen. So this is what we use radio signals for. Your TV for broadcast, your cell phones, hello, airplane control, and of course your normal radio. Moving on to microwaves. Microwaves are basically can range from the size of a human, or the wavelengths can range from the size of a human down to the size of a butterfly. And you probably can guess some of these applications. The next video that I want to show you basically, and I'll just stop it, is something to just show you that there are microwaves in your microwave oven. Please do not try this at home. The reason is the light bulb might explode, and I don't want to take any kind of claims with that. So what I'm doing here, and I recorded this, is basically I'm placing a light bulb in a glass of water, and this is an incandescent light bulb. So what it basically has got a thin kind of tungsten filament inside. Let's see what is happening when we place it in the microwave. Okay, so I place it in a glass of water, right, and into the microwave. I took out the rotational table, so that it's just the glass there, and I'll switch it on. And what you should be able to see is, in fact, that your light bulb, in fact, lights up inside the microwave. So what happens is that your microwave basically passes through the glass and of the light bulb and excites the tungsten filament inside. So this filament, and I don't know if you've had a look at a light bulb, is so thin enough that it basically starts glowing. If you keep it on for too long, and that's why I so quickly switched it off, if you keep it on for too long, it will actually burn the tungsten filament. So again, please do not try this at home. So we use microwaves for lots of very important applications. Your Bluetooth, so communication with other devices. Wireless local area networks, and this is what I'm currently actually using here with my laptop, so that I can basically use these kinds of waves to send pictures across, send videos across, send my voice across. Okay, so now we're going to move on to infrared. And this, basically, this has got a wavelength the size of a needle point. And if you have seen a needle point, you know how very, very small it actually is. So very small radiation wavelengths. Right, so this is the part where you can basically join me. So what you need for this, you just need a remote control. You either need a webcam, or you need your cell phone camera that also would work.
Hi, Tanya.
Yes?
Could you please just change the view from the experiment camera to your face?
Okay, I'll do that. Sorry, I'll just need to, yes, here we go. No, sorry, wrong one. You see, that's when you have too many cameras handy. Okay, that's probably better. Okay, so this is what you need. So this is a simple remote control. What I want you to do is I want you to just point it towards you and just press any button on your remote control. And can you see anything? Okay, I'll try it out and I can't see a thing. But now I'm pointing it towards my web camera. In your case, you can point it towards your web camera, or you can point it towards your cell phone camera. So you're just going to press the button, and what you should be able to see, as soon as I press it down, you should see light coming up, blinking lights. Okay, so I hope that everybody can see this. So while your eyes can't really see infrared light, your camera is a little bit more clever. It can actually see infrared light, a specific portion of infrared light. But there are other devices that can see infrared light, and this is one of these devices here. So what you see here, which looks like a normal compact camera, is in fact what we call an infrared camera. So what basically an infrared camera does, it detects and measures infrared energy. So infrared energy is nothing but heat energy, okay, of any kind of objects. So what happens now is that the camera in fact converts this heat, the temperature, into different kinds of colors. And I'm going to show to you just now, and I'm going to change the camera again. Oops, sorry. I'm going to change the camera to my other camera. So you can see there are colors, different colors. So the blue color in fact means that it's cold temperature. The yellow one means that it's hot temperature, or whatever we can understand it's cold and hot. And when I point it towards my laptop, you can see that there is in fact a hot spot on my laptop. And this hot spot is in fact exactly there where the battery sits, because the battery usually produces it. And you can see the temperature there. So you see this little straight round pointer. So if I point it on this part here, you can see actually the temperature coming out, which is about 44 degrees Celsius. Okay, if I'm going to point it up, for example, to the ceiling, so you can see there's some really, really flancy yellow light, and then there's some dark blue light. So the dark blue is in fact the air con that blows out cold air, and the bright yellow one is in fact my light, so which of course emits heat. So what I'm going to show you now is an experiment. So when I place my hand on the table, so you can see here my hand, I place it on the table, okay? So you can pick up my hand. Usually now when I lift off my hand, you won't be able to see anything on the table, but with my infrared camera, and I hope that you can see it, you can actually see the handprint. It's not a very good handprint because it's wood. Okay, so I'm just doing it again. So I'm placing my hand here. Okay, I'm warming up basically the wood. I'm taking it away, and now you can see the impression of my hand. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to show you as well is right. So I've got a plastic bag here, a black plastic bag. And I'm going to put my hand in here. And can you guess how many fingers I'm holding up here? I'm pretty sure that you are not going to be able to see it. So let's move back to my infrared camera. Okay, so my infrared camera. All right, and I'll just need to make sure. So you can see my face, and I need to move down, and I hope that you can see now. It is a bit tricky, you know, having one hand up there. Okay, let me just point it this way. So what you should be able to see now is my finger, in fact, inside. So there's the plastic bag, and there is my hand. So here you can see my hand, which you can't see usually through the plastic bag. So there's my hand. Now I'm holding up one finger, so you can see the one finger coming up, two fingers, and I'm still in the black plastic bag. Right. So that means that your infrared web camera can penetrate specific material. Okay, things like thin plastic and so on. And if you have very, very fancy ones, they can also penetrate walls, so that you can see sometimes in these spy movies or these army movies and so on, you can actually see people sitting inside a building. They also use infrared. Infrared you can also use for detecting a specific feature in minerals. So here you can see these ones are just ordinary minerals, okay? And so we have minerals like corundum, which would be your red corundum, which would be your ruby. We have a mineral called calcite, celestine, and these minerals, in fact, have a specific property called fluorescence. And they're not going to work with infrared. I'll just need to, sorry, I'll place it in the wrong place, in fact, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so here we have our infrared. Okay, so you can detect different temperatures. Night vision goggles use infrared. Your remote uses infrared. And if you put up your hand in a plastic bag, you can actually see it using infrared. So just like this guy here. Okay, so then we're going to move through the visible light. Okay, visible is what we know. So we know we can see things, we can see colors, we can see rainbows, we can see colorful lights and so on in the night time. So visible light is about the size of kind of bacteria size and so on. And we have different colors with different wavelengths. So your red wavelengths, close to the infrared, is at about 700 nanometers. Your violet is around 400 nanometers. Okay, and again, you can join me with a just ordinary CD. And I'll just keep that one on. Okay, so if you have an ordinary CD, what you can just do is you just take somewhere a piece of light, and then you just kind of wiggle around and you can see all these beautiful diffraction colors. And you will notice that these colors are in fact in the range of your rainbow. So you get all these fantastic rainbow colors. And you can actually use a CD to make a spectroscope. So you can see here I've got blue, I'm going to move over to red, greenish, yellow greenish, and then ultraviolet light and so on. Okay, and I've got something else, and I hope this is going to work, but I'm going to show you here. So this is what we call a diffraction grating. So if I've got some light or white light here, so you can see some white light, and I'm going to place my little diffraction grating down here. You can also see at the very edges, you can see in fact the lights of the rainbow. So my white light is basically made out of different colors. But why do we actually get this kind of spread? And for this, I've already prepared another experiment. I'm just going to pull my screen up, and I'm going to change the camera again. Okay. So what I've got prepared here are different kind of lasers, two different kind of lasers. So one is a red laser, one is a green laser. And just, okay. So, and what I'm going to do is if I'm going to press the red laser, I hope you can see the red buttons here. So you see some 3 red lights here. So here and here, okay. And when I press the green one, you should see also green dots of lights here. So what I have here is in fact, this one here is what we call a diffraction grating. So the light passes through and it breaks it, diffracts the light here. So now let's see what's going to happen if I'm going to press first the red one and now the green one. And you can see now that the red ones are further apart, the dots are further apart than the actual green ones. So just like on your CD, it basically some diffracts further apart than the other ones. So if I would have, for example, a blue one, that would basically be closer together as well. So this is why we get our, this is why we actually get our rainbow colors. So the reds are usually further apart than green than blue. Okay, so here's a setup. So I've got my laser pointers here, which I'm not going to shine at you. So there's one's got two laser pointers shining through a diffraction grating. And you saw how they spread differently. So red was this far apart, the dots were this far apart. With the greens, they were in fact closer together. Okay, so here I've got my CD, and also here at the bottom you can see that the white light, if it basically passes, and this is what you basically see with the dashed line at the bottom right, if my white light passes through this diffraction grating, the reds basically diffract the furthest apart, then followed by orange, yellow, green, and blue. And this is why we actually see now that the blue is here on the inside, the red is here on the outside. So it's basically this kind of range. As I said, you can actually use CDs to do what they call a spectroscope. And interesting is that different elements, in fact, have got a different kind of spectroscopic appearance. So here, for example, here you've got your sunlight or your white light, where you have all sorts of diffuse kind of colors. But as soon as you come to, for example, a neon light or argon light or nitrogen or helium light, you can see that you have distinct bands. And scientists actually use this technique to find out, for example, the composition of, for example, stars and so on. Okay, so ultraviolet. We find ultraviolet light in our sunlight. And ultraviolet light is in fact the size, or the wavelengths of ultraviolet light is in fact the size of molecules. Okay. Right, so what I'm going to show you to now are how we can actually see, and I put it in inverted commas, or how we can kind of determine or detect ultraviolet light. So what I've got here, these ones are what they call ultraviolet light sensitive beads. So what they basically contain is a chemical that reacts to the ultraviolet light. So as at the moment you can see, they are pretty much colorless. Okay, so no color at all. Right. So what I've got here, this is an ultraviolet light source. Just on. There we go. So it almost looks like a white light, but that's because of my camera. But it's believe me, this is an ultraviolet light source. You can also watch scorpions with it. So what you're going to do is, these ones are the beads, and I'm going to shine my ultraviolet light on it. And you can probably guess what is going to happen. So I'm going to shine my light on it. And as you can see, the color changed. I hope that you can see this. I'm shine on it again. And you can see that they change to a different color. The more intense your ultraviolet light is, the more intense or the darker the color is going to be. And you can see it's what they call a reversible process. So as soon as I take it away, the color basically changes back to just colorless. So, and this is because, again, of a specific kind of pigment. Okay, so there are other ways of how I can determine if I've got ultraviolet light or not. And some of them are, for example, called sensors. I've got a sensor here. So this is an ultraviolet light sensor, right? And I've got a program that basically can read what comes out of it. That's what I'm going to share. Here we go. So this is the program. And if I'm going to start, I hope it's going to start. Yes, it starts. And you can see not much, all right? But as soon as I shine my ultraviolet light on it, I hope that you can see a little bit more. No, you don't like how to see. Oh, this is all funny. It is always the same, you know, it works brilliantly when you do the demonstration and the test, and it never ever works. But luckily I had a run before that. So there where you can see basically this humps, this is where my ultraviolet light is. There is very little ultraviolet light. And then when you basically put the ultraviolet light shining on it, then you can see that it starts increasing. And here you can see this is basically ultra UVA and UVB light. Okay, so ultraviolet light. Is there another way of how we can test or tell that there is ultraviolet light out there? Let's have a look. Yes, if you have sensitive skin, you definitely know if there's ultraviolet light out there or not. So your sunburn is a very good ultraviolet light indicator. So if you're going to be out in the sun for too long, you can actually see this young gentleman here or this older gentleman here basically getting a very red skin, and it's almost like a burn. It hurts like, yes, so if you've ever had one, you know, then basically your skin is slightly damaged. So, and we have what we call ultraviolet light indexes. So if you have UV1 and 2, you can stay safely inside, so you don't really need protection. So for example, if it's like an overcast day and you're in the shade, then usually your UV exposure is not too high. But from 3 to 7, okay, so protection is required. So if the UV index is about in this range here, you should seek shade during midday hours, okay, because remember in the shade there is not so much ultraviolet light radiation coming through. And very important is also to slip on a shirt, or you basically put sunscreen on. And the factor basically determines how long your sunscreen will last. Also very important, you have to wear a hat, because otherwise your brain might get cooked as well. If you have a UV index from 8 to 11 plus, you need actually extra protection. So usually you should avoid being outside during the day hours and be sure to stay in the shade. And definitely shirt, sunscreen, and a hat are a must. Also quite interesting is how specific insects also see an ultraviolet light. So remember with the infrared, our eyes didn't see it, the camera saw it. So this is the same with ultraviolet light. So if we, for example, see a flower like this, and we see a yellow color, insects, in fact, are able to pick up an ultraviolet light spectrum and see like you know, this kind of white, purpley kind of flower thing. And I have to go back now because I've placed my little video clip here in the wrong place. This also, ultraviolet light also applies for minerals. So as I said, so these ones are minerals under just normal plain light. So we have calcite, scapolite, corundum, or corundum, which is in this case is your ruby. And if we shine ultraviolet light on, only ultraviolet light, it's actually going to look like this. Here we have the ultraviolet light on. And you can see now that you see a different color range. And this is an effect called fluorescence. Okay, so fluorescence, so what happens is that electrons get very, very excited and they'll be transferred to a higher energy level through this very energetic ultraviolet light. So when you take away, or when the energy, basically what happens then is that the electrons in fact fall back onto a lower level and emit light in the visible range. So in the case of corundum, this red; in the case of scapolite, this bright, bright yellow. And for our calcite, we've got this very beautiful pinkish color. And in fact, there is a mineral where this effect was named after. This mineral, its name is fluorite. Okay, so now that we've detected ultraviolet light, let's move on to the next one, which are X-rays. So remember, the wavelengths of X-rays are in the range of atoms. And how do we get, in fact, X-rays? So what you have is you have a filament. It can be copper, it can be tungsten, it can be copper or wolfram or molybdenum and so on. And you're basically shooting it on a metal target. For example, copper, iron, and so on. And you're generating electrons. And once these electrons they are so energetic, once they hit the target, the metal target, in fact, they emit rays. And these ones are your X-rays. And here I've got a little video clip, and I hope that you notice what you're basically seeing here. So this is basically an X-ray image of a human. And you can see that it looks pretty gross, that he's swallowing something. Okay, so I hope that you saw the liquid. So he's now drinking something. And we can use X-rays, in fact, not only to X-ray bones. So you can see he's still swallowing. So here's from the front, and you can see how it basically goes down. Right, and you can see inside how it basically moves down the liquid. It looks very interesting. Okay, so again, he's drinking something. All right, so this is basically the main purpose, and where you probably know X-rays from, simply by X-raying your bones and so on for medical purposes. There are also other different applications. So for example, at the airport, they also use X-ray scanners. And here you can see an image of an X-ray scan, and you can see the bits and pieces. So there seems to be like a brush, a kind of a can. There seems to be some electronic equipment. And of course, you can quite nicely see the gun that is in the suitcase. So for security purpose, people also use X-rays. And this strange looking image on the left with all the dots and so on is in fact an X-ray image of a mineral. Okay, so when scientists also use X-rays to shoot X-rays onto minerals for identification purposes, they shoot X-rays onto minerals to find out where the atoms in the mineral are sitting. And this one quite nicely shows that you have, in fact, symmetry, what we call symmetry. So you've got all 4 points here. And this is probably what you're looking at, is probably a salt crystal here. Last but not least, we have our gamma rays. So we have an atomic nuclei. We know we can produce gamma rays from nuclear explosions, nuclear bombs, and so on. We can also use gamma rays for different other purposes. And here you can see me, and there's this little box here. I'm holding a strange device in my hand. And this is what they call a Geiger counter. And you can see the kind of green arrow on the right. And it basically moves out if there is something that is called radioactivity. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that you've seen it. And what I'm going to do now is I'm basically going to get my rock here. This is the very same rock. So this is a radioactive rock. And this device here is called a Geiger counter. So I'm just pulling it up. So this is a Geiger counter. So this is where you basically kind of pick up the signals. Okay, so a Geiger counter is basically used to detect radioactive emission. And so usually, commonly, what we call beta particles or gamma particles. Okay, so I'm going to switch my device on. I'll just move the webcam out. I'm not too sure if you already. Okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, so I'm going to hold it up like this, which you're usually not supposed to do with radioactive minerals. So please, if you ever come across one, please don't do what I'm doing. Okay, so as you can see, if I move my thing around, you might hear the odd beep beep. And I'm going to move mine here. So you can hear some beep beep, very faint beep beep. But when I'm getting closer to these dark green minerals here, so you can see. So you can hear quite a frantic beep, 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 beep. So you're like here and here. And as soon as I move away on this side here, you only hear every now and again the beep. So the more it does this beep, 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 the more radioactive or the more gamma particles or gamma rays are going to be emitted from this rock here. So this green mineral is in fact a radioactive mineral which contains a radioactive element called thorium. Okay, so where do we use radioactive radiation? I mean, apart from, of course, your nuclear bombs and so on, we use, in fact, this type of radiation, for example, to generate electricity. So there is the nuclear power plant in Coburg here in South Africa, where we use things like uranium and so on to produce, in fact, electricity. You can also use gamma rays or radioactive minerals to basically to use it for medicine and medical purposes. So what you basically have is radioactive cobalts that generate gamma rays, and then you're more or less wearing a helmet. And in this helmet, there's only a small hole that directs, for example, the gamma rays onto the target, which might be a brain tumor or something like this. So something that you can't really get rid of through surgery and so on. Gamma rays also are very high energetic and they penetrate a lot of material. So for example, your paper, your plastic, your steel, and for example, your lead. And this brings me to the end of it, and I'll just quickly, oops, sorry, I'll just try and see if we can get this one.
Mr. Worldwide, C-Paul. So listen up. Here we go. Electromagnetic spectrum, here we go. Electromagnetic spectrum, here we go. Electromagnetic spectrum, here we go. Electromagnetic spectrum.
Radio waves, what's on TV tonight? And microwaves, they will cook your popcorn. From body light that's infrared comes from you and me. You can see visible light colors galore. Not shady ultraviolet rays can give you a suntan. And then X-rays, look at bones if you want. And there be shortest of them all are the gamma rays. All together it's the EM spectrum.
Okay, so just to recap our path through our electromagnetic spectrum. So we explored the radio waves and how you can in fact block off radio waves by using, for example, a metal container or a strain or something like this. We then moved on to microwaves, where we've seen how microwaves can actually light up a light bulb. And if you want to really try an experiment in the microwave oven with yourself, not with yourself, if you want to try an experiment, what you just get is a slab of chocolate. Okay, you're going to take out the turnstile, so the plate that rotates, and you're going to place your slab of chocolate on the plate, and then you're going to put it in the microwave oven. And just for a couple of seconds, you're going to turn your microwave oven on. What you should be able to see are little wells inside your chocolate. Okay, and you can basically use your tape measure to measure the distance and find out the wavelengths of your microwaves. Okay, and then we went on to infrared. I showed you the infrared camera and how we can basically determine temperature with infrared radiation by using this camera. How your remote control, in fact, also uses infrared radiation. You can make it visible through a cell phone camera or a web camera. We then went on to the visible. You saw how basically an ordinary CD kind of diffracts the light into its basic components. We saw that if you pass red laser light, which is just a light of a single wavelength, that it basically spreads further apart when it passes through a diffraction grating or diffracts further apart. Then green light. We went on to ultraviolet light. So there are specific types of beads that, when exposed to ultraviolet light, that change their colors. This is in fact photochromatic effect. We also had a look at the ultraviolet light, how it basically, how minerals change its colors with an effect called fluorescence. Did I forget something with the ultraviolet light? I don't think so. We then moved on to X-rays, how we can have X-rays basically in medicine to basically check out what's kind of inside you. We saw burns, we saw somebody drinking a liquid and how this liquid went down. And then last but not least, we moved on to gamma rays, and I showed you a Geiger counter and how to detect the gamma rays using a Geiger counter. And then there are, in fact, radioactive minerals and radioactive rocks out there in nature. And that basically brings me to the end. If you have any questions, just let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to give it back to Steph. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you do have any questions, please post them in the comments now or unmute yourself. But otherwise, thank you so much, Tanya, for another creative and informative workshop. they really are just mind-blowing how you can use everyday objects to teach all these different things. Otherwise, next month is our final month of our virtual festival, and the theme is innovation in all fields. So keep an eye on our socials and website, www.scifest.org.za, for future updates on events. And
yeah, this is it from my side. So that was my last workshop in the Cyphers Africa series. I hope you enjoyed them, and if you enjoyed them, let other people know. If you didn't enjoy them, please keep quiet. We want other people to watch the videos. Right, thank you so much, guys, and I wish everyone a really lovely weekend.
thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.